Then I'll introduce you to the documentary that is assigned for this week. It's a continuation of that series, Black in Latin America. This one is called The Black Grandma in the Closet, that focuses on Mexico and Peru. One of the things we get introduced to regarding Mexico is that Mexico in the middle of the 17th century had just as many blacks as there were whites. And that's important because Mexico tends to identify as a white or European and indigenous country. And they seem to erase their black ancestry, even though there were just as many black people there as there were white people. And in this, and so that's what the documentary says. And from these numbers from a book called The History of Mexico, it actually says that there were a lot more blacks than there were Europeans. You were in this documentary, you get introduced to Yanga, and it is a topic I've already lectured on before. Yanga is the name of the person who created the first free town in the Americas. And this was in Mexico, close to Veracruz, the state and port of Veracruz in 1609. Something we've learned about before as well is the casta paintings, where in colonial Spanish America, they had a caste system, kind of a different way of categorizing people by racial groups, where it's this, but instead of having the one drop rule that the US had, they would have kind of a spectrum, different categories. It was different whether you were half black or 25% black or 1/8 black, etc. And so I bring this up because the documentary introduces you to a couple people and what they would have been categorized as, had they been around during Spanish colonial times. And so former US President Obama would have been called mulatto, which is a result of someone being the child of a white person and a black person. That one's pretty easy, straightforward. More difficult is the question of Tiger Woods. We are told that Tiger Woods would be a lobo, which is the result of someone who is Asian, black, and indigenous. So the mixture of the three. And in the case of Tiger Woods, he's a quarter Thai, quarter Chinese, quarter Caucasian, eighth African American, and eighth Native American. And so just interesting again how in the US, this 1/8 makes them black in our eyes because of our own legacies of the one drop rule. So again, Tiger Woods would be Lobo, L-O-B-O. This documentary introduces us to Vicente Guerrero. This is someone else we've also already learned about. Vicente Guerrero was mixed race, including black. He played an important role in the Independence War of Mexico and went on to become the second president of Mexico and the person who outlawed slavery in Mexico in 1829. This is something I haven't lectured on before. This is new from this documentary. What is the blackest region of Mexico? It's an area referred to as the small coast, La Costa Chica. La Costa Chica is on this Pacific coast of the Mexican states of Oaxaca and Guerrero. So that's the blackest area of Mexico, but so is Veracruz, and that's where Yanga built his first free black settlement in the Americas. And by the way, most Mexican immigrants to Wisconsin come from the state of Veracruz. We get introduced to a couple controversies in one in Mexico and one in Peru. For Mexico, it's the 2005 controversy of these postage stamps of a cartoon character called Memín Pinguín. So these comic books used to be very popular for most of the 20th century in Mexico. And one of the classic characters was Memín Pinguín, which was this black character. And in 2005, the Mexican government, created these stamps kind of commemorating, remembering, in their own way, the quote unquote good old days of in Mexico, kind of these things that people associate with the comic books of their childhood, but being completely blind to the racist history of those depictions in those comic books. And this also brings up the point that in Latin America, they tend to be more class conscious. And in the US, we tend to be more race conscious. So in Latin America, they're very race conscious and they're kind of blind to the racism that happens. In the US, we're more race conscious, but then we're blind to the class exploitation of people too, because maybe it's our history of the Cold War and not wanting to analyze capitalism. And so hence, Mexico is just kind of blind to the racism that they're perpetuating with these old images. We also learned that in 2020 was the first time that the Mexican census made black an option on the census. And so again, there's this long history of Mexico not acknowledging, erasing its black history. And so in 2020 was the first time that they had it as an option. And they learned, that's important because then they learned, what are the blackest parts of Mexico? They're 2% of the population. That's 2.5 million people that are Black Mexicans. Then we get introduced to Peru. Susana Baca is a musician, singer in Peru, who got a Grammy and helped bring attention to the existence of Black Peruvians. There's 2 million Afro-Peruvians in Peru today. We also get introduced to how slavery in Peru was different, whether you were in a rural hacienda, where it was more kind of similar to plantation style, versus people who had slaves in cities, where there was better treatment and more opportunities for slaves to be able to make money on the side and buy their freedom. We also get introduced to Mónica Carrillo in Peru, who addresses the fact that, Peru apologized for slavery, but she says, that's not enough. We need policies to fight racism today, not just say sorry about what happened 200 years ago. And then there's, issues in Peru as well in their media. So, for example, in Peru, they have this character called El Negro Mama. And in 2013, the show was removed because they acknowledged that the racist caricatures that this character would do. The government asked the show to be removed. The TV station was fined $26,000, but it didn't last long. In 2015, the show was brought back, arguing that they were being censored and that they should have freedom of speech, and that being racist, saying racist things, doing racist depictions, shouldn't be censored. And so it ended up coming back. El Negro Mama, with his kind of exaggerated racist portrayals of Black people and blackface, not to mention he's not Black. And then, similar characters, this being an actual Indigenous woman, and this being this caricaturization and stereotyping of Native American women, being played by a man too. And so, yes, improvements have been made, but, there's still a long way to go in Mexico and Peru, so that they can acknowledge their Black history, or as this documentary says, acknowledging the Black grandmother in their closet.